Welcome back to Granja Caimito in the Pedroche Valley of Andalusia, Spain. In this video, I want to share a bit about our current planning process, to show you what we want to achieve over time and how the dependencies look like. Keep in mind that everything what follows is preliminary. I thought I share a little bit something of our big plan for everybody's understanding, and also because I think that this could be a model for other people wanting to do a similar thing. So here on this board I tried to map out, style of a mind map, dependencies and goals and all the stuff that comes to mind in order to create a working farm that actually provides food to people. Of course, this is totally incomplete. This is totally incomplete, and this is just the current state of the train of thought. So let me give a little bit tour about what we have here. So it begins by the very, very lofty goal, which means we would like to offer a meal. So comida in Spanish is meal, and that means we want to put something on people's table. We don't want to sell them ingredients, but actually be their meal provider, so to say. But of course, that lofty goal requires us to have a kitchen, a professional kitchen, and besides meat from the pigs, meat from the cows, meat from some chickens or other birds, it also requires vegetables and spices and herbs and all that stuff. So that's quite complicated and is a very lofty and far away goal, but you have to have a goal, and it might be a very stretched goal. So no problem, but at least that is the direction. Something that is much more achievable is the sale of eggs. So for the sale of eggs, we already know, and we are beginning to work on that we need mobile shelters, egg mobiles as some call it, where the chicken can have their nests and put the eggs, and where they can spend the night in protection. But then once we have collected the eggs, we need a place where we can sort them and classify them and stamp them and make them ready for sale. So that is what we call Palacio del Huevo, so the egg palace. That's basically a structure that will house a cold storage room and some tables where the work can be done. So there's a dependency, but it's not that complicated. And when we go further down, we would like to also sell the meat from birds, and there are other dependencies, and one of those is the topic of permissions. We cannot just do things as we please and construct whatever we like. We need to get permission to do these things on our land, because that's the way it is. And then there's another goal that comes after the sale of eggs, which is pastured eggs. So before we can have pastured eggs, we need to have the basics working, and then of course the more important thing, which shows up further here, the fertility of the soil, because if there is no fertility, then there is no pasture, and without pasture we cannot have pastured eggs. So it gets complex pretty quickly. But let me continue with some of the commercially oriented goals. So then we have the sale of pig meat, pork, and the sale of red meat, cow meat. And when we sell meat from the cows, then we also want to let this dry age so that it's much better quality, and of course the price that we can charge for it is also significantly higher. But in order to dry age meat, we need to have a cold storage place with environmental control, So there's another construction thing, which again requires permissions. And of course it requires enough electricity. We are out in the middle of nowhere, so everything has to be solar powered. But then of course every structure has a roof, and roofs can be used to put solar panels on, and then the electricity shouldn't be a problem, but it's a lot of investment and a lot of things that need to be done. Now, something that is related to the soil fertility and the plants, in order to sell meat, sell meals, not meat, we also need vegetables and herbs. The herbs and the vegetables we can grow in little gardens of the type food forest, and we can establish these food forests on the berms of all the swales and other water retention zones that we are going to create. So there's an interdependency between those. Then there's something else to consider. So if we want to sell pork and beef, then we also need to consider the restrictions set forth by the government agency. They are called OCA around here. That is basically an agency that tells you whether you can have your own breed, your own breeding facility, whether you can have cows and all that. So they require some infrastructure that has to be in place. And then of course they also limit you a little bit in the number of animals that you can keep, because there is a problem with nitrates and the leakage of this and all kinds of environmental concerns. So I won't go into details here, but there are some things that need to be considered. So now, in order to have a lot of pork for sale, we of course need the pigs. The best idea would be to breed them, so we need the maternity ward area for the pigs. That depends on a permission. That permission depends on having a pig shelter. In Spanish it's called saurda. Of course we have a plan for doing that. So if I move over here, here is the beginning of that. And we need to construct this, so it requires some concrete work and metal roofing, and there are rules how this has to be, because it is there to protect the pigs from any contagious disease that might appear. And then we get an order to move all the animals into that shelter, and the shelter has to be closed off so that birds, for example, cannot come in, and the materials are also prescribed. So for example, the walls need to be made of concrete so that insects cannot hide in any crack and stuff like that, because all those could be vectors to spread the disease. But then there's also an internal restriction that we have. So we need to make sure that our pathways where the animals can walk along and find water and move to different areas are made in a way that the pigs will only go to the next paddock where they are supposed to be, and not venture out elsewhere. So we need to make the fencing apt for the pigs. And then in order to keep going with the cows, we also need to have our cattle sorting facility, because the guys from this agency here, they want to come and do inspection. For example, once a year, they want to check whether we have animals infected with tuberculosis. And for that we need the infrastructure. And we also want to do health checks every month. So that means we also need this for ourselves. So we need that facility, and of course we have started, but it is still a work in progress, and it's an important dependency here. So down here, this area contains a part of the plan how to make it happen. And then when we want to do all the foodstuffs over here, there's also another concern. We need to maintain security and cleanliness in our compound. So we also need to design ways to ensure that everything is safe and clean. Now, of course, in order to feed all these animals, we come to the area that I put here in the center part. The distance has no meaning, it's just to have some room to move things around. So we need to start with a lot of grazing, and grazing of course is dependent on fertility in the soil and also the retention of rainwater, and it's also dependent on shade, and these things have other dependencies. So the retention of water, there is a dependencies on having swales and temporary water holes and stuff like that. And then there is an idea that when we have those swales and those temporary water holes, we can use vetiver around this to control erosion. We can use it as mulch material. We can use it as biomass, turn it into compost so that we have plant feed basically, and we can also use it for forage. In order to improve the fertility of the soil, we have this idea to plant a lot of tagasaste trees. This is the lucerne tree or alfalfa tree, and this is directly forage, but it is also like a water pump. So it creates a taproot up to 10 meters deep, and that taproot is supposed to lift up the water table a little bit. So because of that, then the grasses, which we need for the grazing here in this area, they should also benefit from it. And in order to have shade, we have the mitigation strategy, so we could say that, with the palovnia trees. So they will provide shade because they are more trees and they have very big leaves. And also they provide biomass and also forage, because the cows can also eat the leaves. So that's basically tree forage. But this whole block here depends on having a nursery, and the nursery depends on a little project that we are currently doing in our compound, which is to figure out a smarter way to have water here, running water and water with some pressure, so that we can use it for sprinklers and similar things. And of course, having a good source of water and clean water is also important for the other things further down the line, like that kitchen, and of course when you have an on-farm slaughterhouse, which is something that comes out of this. So this is about the sale of meat from birds. Then of course you need to have a good water source. And now that the water is used in that slaughterhouse, of course there is now contaminated water, and that also leads to the need to figure out where to put it. And there are some restrictions, because I know already that we cannot use it for fruit trees, but we can use it in other areas. For example, we can use it to put this into swales and use it for other plants that will not produce something for human consumption. And when you now look at the center section here, it's all about grazing. So currently we have grazing in zone A, C, D and E, and there's a dependency. In zone A, the neighbor's cows a little while ago destroyed a lot of our electric fencing there, so we need to fix this. And this is now a high priority thing, because when it now starts to rain, then 30 days later we will have some pasture available, and when we want to let the cow take advantage of this, the fencing in zone A needs to be fixed. And then in zone C, we have the area where currently the pigs and the cows are, and there we have someone on standby. Once it has rained a little bit and the soil is a little bit more moist, then he will come pick up some of the rocks and start seeding, so that we have by spring a lot of good forage there, and then we will manage that. And in the other zone where we have the palovnias on the berm, there is another dependency. So we need to form some paddocks, so that means fencing, and we also need to build some animal pathways there. But then it's important to consider that these pathways are made pig safe, so that the pigs stay in the lane and do not venture out to other areas, which they will do when they smell that there are acorns. But we need to manage that. And the same goes for zone D and zone E. So this is the beginning of our way to understand amongst us all why we need to do something and what it leads to and what is a dependency and what is a hidden dependency. And I think I will update this frequently and share with you so that you have an idea what is going on and why we are doing things and how we are doing. So let me know in comments what you think about that. Of course, as the local people here all speak Spanish, this has to be in Spanish. Some of you are writing me about wanting to come here and help on all this. So I do appreciate that and we will figure out a way. But first we also need to construct something where we can offer you accommodation, because there's no other place around. The nearest village is 10 kilometers away and there's no place to stay. So we need to figure out how to do this, but it's on the plan. So we will have a barn, and inside that barn we will have some sleeping quarters, but one step at a time. We got the permit for it, so it's now a question of saving the money so that we can build it, and then we will build it, and hopefully by next year this will then be there. And I can see that we will have an international community here, so at the end of the day all this planning stuff probably needs to be in English and Spanish so that everybody is able to understand. And of course there's an opportunity to learn Spanish, so whoever is interested in language, farming and all the other things around is welcomed, but of course we need to figure out how to pull all this off. But there's plenty of time, there's no rush. And you will learn by means of these videos how this goes and when it is possible. So thank you for listening to that, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of an idea where we are and where we are going to.